most hearty welcome to those of you whose tastes lean toward the bizarre. This is Ross and Wizzy's Fanfiction Power Hour. I am your host, Wizzy Puff, and with me as always is Ross Pitt.
A most hearty welcome to all of you out there, especially of those of you whose tastes lean towards the bizarre. I am your host, Ross Pitt.
This is the beginning of the spooky month of October. So you know, as always, we're going to be reading some very spooky fanfictions.
Truly, gut-terrorizing fanfictions.
Our first painting submitted for your approval is one of religious nature, but I promise there's nothing holy about it. This painting is by an author named Hoarse Voice, and it is titled Biblical Monsters. This is the Fanfiction Gallery.
Wow, 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 wow.
Chapter 1. On December 14th, at 3:15 a.m., Adams woke me with a loud knock on my front door.
Put your boots on,
he said when I answered.
There's a biblical monster in my house.
Man, I want to be friends with a guy like Adams. He would never get
Me too. He sounds awesome.
boring.
He sounds like he has a peg leg, smokes a wooden pipe.
Maybe an eye patch.
Perhaps.
I said nothing, but did as he asked. If any part of my mind comprehended the ramifications of what he had said, it assumed I had misheard. I knew better than to drag my feet when Adams gave an order, but took a few seconds to grab a raincoat before following him. By the time I had closed the door behind me, Adams had already marched halfway back to his house. As I hurried after, bracing against the blowing rain, I peripherally glimpsed the blinking points of the 7-kilometer and 10-kilometer beacons in the distance. Besides them, and the lights from our station's buildings, the universe was solid black. When I reached his house's foyer, Adams gestured toward the living room.
It's in there,
he said.
Keep an eye on it. I'll be back when my weather report is done.
He edged past me, and heedless of the storm, began marching toward the building that housed the generators and radio equipment. I hung up my coat and shuffled to the large open space that was 1/3 kitchen and 2/3 living room. Still foggy-brained, I did not at first comprehend the pastel shape that lay sprawled on Adams's couch, unmoving except for rapid, shallow breaths. His use of the phrase biblical monster had been deliberate. Oh my god! Because unicorns are in the Bible!
Holy cow. We did have a discussion about this before. I think.
I think I remember talking about that because I was surprised that not many people know that unicorns are in the Bible.
Right, yeah. The King James version of the Book of Job followed the Septuagint and Jerome's Vulgate in the translation of Riem into unicorn.
Yeah, I think it was like specifically once the King James translation was made, they actually called them unicorns.
What a badass. What a badass.
If he had called our visitor a unicorn, he might not have reminded me of how wrong I was regarding certain touchy subjects we had sometimes debated, but he had kept his tone neutral. Perhaps he had used that particular phrase to avoid giving me incorrect information. I considered myself well-read, but was not aware of any mythology involving unicorns with wings. Never heard of an alicorn, buddy? Wow.
Actually, alicorns are a My Little Pony invention.
Are they?
At the very least, I think the name alicorn is.
Okay.
Or at least I think the name... I think I've heard somewhere before that alicorn is actually a material. Like, what their horns are made out of or something. What the unicorn's horn is made out of. But I don't know for certain on that. But I'm pretty sure, at the very least, the word alicorn to describe unicorn with wings is My Little Pony made.
Yeah, I guess it'd probably just get called a unicorn or a pegasus in other media.
Yeah. Incorrectly.
The creature's shape consisted almost entirely of smooth curves. With some imagination, the legs, neck, and torso might resemble those of a horse or a deer, but this was only for lack of anything else to compare them with. None of the proportions matched those of either animal. It had a smaller torso and pelvis, supported by short, stocky legs, with an unobtrusive, solid hoof at the end of each. A pattern of stars, 1 large and 5 small, had been dyed in the hair on its flank. Oh my god, no, Twilight.
Oh dear.
I suspected the 6 stars, each with 6 points, must have clinched the religious connection in Adam's mind.
Oh.
Oh my god. Is this marked comedy at all? Nope. But it is probably going to be a little bit funny.
I mean, sometimes authors just can't help themselves.
Yep. Especially when doing this. The head was something like a human's, albeit with an ungulate's ears, rather large eyes, and a slightly cat-like snout. Its mane and tail, though now mussed and tangled, seemed to have once been cut and dyed. The creature was entirely covered in short hairs, which had been dyed a soft purple, quite expertly, I thought, since not a single strand had been missed. A short spiraled horn, which reminded me of a narwhal, protruded from the simian forehead, completing the bizarre image. Holding my breath to avoid disturbing the sleeping creature, I peered at the horn as close as I dared. The foremost strands of mane had fallen away from it, and its base disappeared into the hairs of the coat, seemingly attached by no outside means. The bird-like wings, which connected to the body just behind the shoulders, were folded tight against the creature's sides. I thought they must be vestigial, as they were far too small to lift their owner. I stepped back and leaned against Adams's kitchen table. For a second, I wondered why he had not seemed to share my sense of wonder at all this. Moreover, why had he left me to watch the creature, which I assumed he knew nothing more about than I did? What would it do if it woke up? Would it be hostile? Then I remembered who I was dealing with. To Adams, his behavior made sense. In his philosophy, there existed no shortage of creatures and spirits most people considered mythical. Besides, in his 24 years in this job, he had not missed giving a single weather report, and according to him, had never made an incorrect one. The arrival of an exotic animal, whose existence he had always known, was not reason enough to disrupt this. So, can Adams, travel between the realms? Did he find the mirror?
Nah. I don't think Adams can. I think he's just a weirdo.
But if he can see all these mythical creatures, what if it's all just creatures from the pony world?
I mean, it's said in his mythology.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering that right. I think he's just bizarrely religious or superstitious.
That would also make sense.
And you also asked if he went through the mirror world. No. This came out in early 2013. And Equestria Girls was later 2013.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Schooled ya.
He was the best lighthouse keeper I'd ever met.
Yes, I based him off of whatever his name was from the lighthouse.
Nice. Seriously, that was a perfect voice for this character.
Yep. Did I listen to a brief bit of an audio drama from this or something? I don't know. That was perfect for me. Wow.
As well as the worst biblical literalist.
There are stories of dragons in almost every major culture.
He had once said grandly.
The idea for them had to have come from something from the earliest days of civilization, or perhaps just before.
People found dinosaur bones, I said. They didn't know about fossilization back then, so they assumed the bones belonged to a living creature. At this, he had grown quiet, and I decided not to press the issue. Now, he no doubt considered the matter settled. If one mythical beast existed, there must be others. Well, it's fair.
Yeah.
Anybody ready? Can probably put like a radio sound effect over that in the post.
Yep. Do that, Tom.
That was the radio telephone in the corner of the kitchen. The circuit operator was asking which station wanted to give its weather report first. I hurried to turn the volume down, but was already too late. The corner of my eye caught a flicker of movement, and I jerked my head around just in time to see the creature's eyes open. I must have been the first thing it saw, for it made a sound like "Ah!" as it scrambled to its hooves and tried to back away, only to fall off the couch and sprawl on the carpet.
What are you?
It said as it awkwardly rose again. I could not believe my ears. When the creature's mouth moved, a woman's voice issued forth. I started backwards, too shocked to respond.
In fact, the woman's voice, it kind of sounded like, what's her name? Grey Delisle, that's it.
That's the wrong one!
Who are you?
It said. Later, it occurred to me this rephrasing was probably for the sake of politeness. For a long moment, the beast and I stared into one another's faces, each waiting for the other to make a move. It kept one hoof half raised, as if ready to fight or flee. I tried to think of something appropriate to say, but given the situation's absurdity, I doubt I could have broken the ice at the best of times, let alone at 3:30 a.m.
Do you want a piece of toast?
It's in his pajamas. At last, it lowered its hoof and squinted its large eyes a bit.
Can you understand me?
Yes, I said reflexively.
Oh!
The creature smiled and brushed a few strands of mane from its face.
Well, at least something's gone right.
She gave a sort of four-legged bow.
I am Princess Twilight Sparkle.
Of course you are.
Naturally.
Yeah, who else would it be?
Know any other purple winged unicorns? Come on.
I'm not sure why I said this. I suppose the name rounded out the whole ridiculous picture.
Huh?
Twilight said. I did not have a chance to explain myself, as at that moment the front door opened and Adams marched in. Twilight opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it and regarded him warily. He had always been more imposing than me, with his often grubby clothes, beard stubble, hard expression, and sometimes crusty demeanor. But come on! Friggin' Applejack has that all the time, you're used to it.
Yeah.
On more than one occasion, I had found myself in the role of the good cop. Adams did not speak at first, but crossed the floor until he was a half-step closer to Twilight than me. An alarm sounded in my mind.
Hello?
Twilight said. Adams's only registration of surprise at this was an extra blink and a slight twitch of his upper body, but he must not have found it too strange, since he responded right away.
Are you a harbinger?
What?
Harbinger of the end times.
Twilight squinted one eye, raised the other's brow, tilted her head a bit, and said, He's wondering if you're here to warn us about the end of the world. I said. There was no sense trying to soften it, though I had never taken Adams's apocalyptic ideas seriously. I now wondered how much he had actually been right about, right?
Yeah. This would kind of break my fucking brain.
It's like, oh, I know what this is. I'm schizophrenic.
It's the easier thing to accept.
Yep. Twilight's head tilting and eyebrow raising grew more acute, and she bit her lower lip a bit. I realized she was trying to think of a polite way to say no. She must not have known anything about Adams's vaunted end times, or she would have replied right away. After a few seconds, Twilight's expression changed to that of someone desperately trying to make friends. A wide smile betrayed by worry creases around the eyes and forehead.
Okay. I think you have me at a bit of a disadvantage.
She picked over the words as if she was afraid of setting us off.
Don't take this the wrong way, but I have no idea what you guys even are.
We're lighthouse keepers,
Adams said.
You guys have lighthouses?
Twilight looked at the floor and tapped her head with a forehoof.
So, assuming we don't have the same word for two different things, you must have advanced moral or ethical standards.
She was thinking out loud. The strangeness of a mythical beast having such a human quirk was not lost on me.
We know you're a unicorn,
Adams said.
Alicorn.
Twilight said, cutting him off.
What?
The crease on Adams's brow meant he was in no mood to be corrected.
Winged unicorn.
There's a bit more to it than that, Twilight. Come on.
No, that's just what they are. That's it. There's nothing more.
Yeah, Celestia and Luna and Cadence don't have things in common that Twilight will soon experience that I'm sure this author did not have time to actually see yet. Twilight flexed her somewhat ruffled wings. If Adams cared about the distinction, he didn't show it.
I got up about 40 minutes ago and found you laying unconscious on my doorstep. You were protected from the rain by the house's overhanging roof, but were exposed to the cold. I carried ye inside and went to fetch my assistant.
Adams was not always so impersonal. This manner was the same he used when writing in the station's log. I wondered if he would have the sense to forego an entry on this incident when it was all over.
That's a relief.
Twilight's worried expression softened a bit.
I guess if you helped me, you,
She paused, abandoning her thought, whatever it had been, mid-sentence.
Well, thank you very much.
It's our job,
Adams said.
Thought your job was lighthouse keeper.
True! Got him! Man, he's getting corrected all over the place. I wondered why God would create a man like Adams, who spoke to a purple unicorn-like creature in the same way he addressed any of the other people he had helped over the years. You're lucky you ended up here, I said. This time of year, at this time of night, localized entirely within my kitchen.
May I see it?
No. This time of year, at this time of night, there isn't a soul for 50 miles. It was barely an exaggeration. Welcome to Cook Point, by the way.
You guys know about unicorns, even though I've never heard of...
Twilight looked back and forth between Adams and I.
How much do you know about unicorns, by the way? How much do you know about Davy?
Is that a reference?
Yeah, to Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest.
Oh. I gotta watch those at some point.
You really do. You just need to watch the first 3. The other ones aren't good.
You're the first either of us has met,
Adams said.
and not everyone believes you exist.
So was Twilight teleported into the future?
Oh, I don't know. She probably did something with her magic.
They were talking about earlier about how before civilization, yada yada. So that's my current theory.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and that explains why they're in the Bible.
Yep.
While this was true, I wondered if Adams was deliberately withholding the true extent of the fact, or was simply being as brief as possible. I decided to interject before he could start talking biblically again. "Before we go any further," I said, "maybe you should tell us how you got here, from the beginning."
Me first?
Our guest said.
Well, all right.
From outside came the whoosh of a mighty gust, and the large double-pane window that looked out over Vargas Bay creaked over the edges. Nothing was now visible in that direction, except the orange light from the boathouse down the hill. Twilight looked out the window and shivered a little. I imagined the scene must have been unnerving to her, as if she had no idea what our world looked like during the day. She turned back to us, got up on the couch, and sat upright. Cat-like, with a calming breath, she began.
I am Princess Twilight Sparkle, the most favored student of Princess Celestia, one of the 2 diarchs of Equestria.
She paused, regarded our faces, and frowned at what she saw there.
For just over 3 years, I've been specializing in friendship-based magic.
That be the dumbest thing I ever did here.
Twilight flinched as Adams crossed his arms and his frown deepened.
But that's not what brought me here. A long time ago, there lived a unicorn named Starswirl the Bearded. He was genius, centuries ahead of his time. He invented or dramatically expanded disciplines like amniomorphics, weather control, and teleportation. In the big National Archive in Canterlot, that's our capital city, there's an entire wing dedicated to his work. A few months ago, I was given instructions for a spell that Starswirl had left unfinished. Using modern magic, I was able to complete it.
Time magic.
This week, I got some personal time, so I decided to spend it looking into Starswirl's more obscure works. I soon found there were other spells he left unfinished, several in fact, and since I'd gained much more powerful magic by completing one, I decided to try and finish these as well. I guess I should have asked Princess Celestia for advice first. I thought this one spell was supposed to allow me to walk through walls, but...
She looked out the window again, probably hoping for any sign of dawn.
Now I realize the instructions referred to the walls of reality. Writings in Old Equus are sometimes weird that way. The first time I tried this, I messed the spell up, and it wasn't easy to set things right. This time, it worked too well, and when I realized what was going on, it was too dangerous to stop the casting. It was one of the more strenuous things I've ever done, and...
She raised a hoof to her muzzle.
Just a minute.
She turned toward the nearby coffee table. It was bare, except for one of Adams's Bibles. A soft-cover King James printed on thin paper. Yo, King James, it's the one with the unicorns.
Let's go. This guy did his research.
Yeah. Also, I think it's like the most popular Bible, so could have just gotten lucky.
Yeah.
Twilight fixed her gaze on it, licked her lips, and gritted her teeth. For the second time that day, I could not believe my senses. There was a sound I had never heard before, which I can only describe as a shimmering in my ears. Sunset!
Don't do it before Equestria Girls.
Aw, man.
Cool your jets.
A wavering magenta glow surrounded both Twilight's horn and the book on the table, and as she concentrated, the book lifted off, pulled upward as if by a magician's string. In less than a second, Adams crossed the floor and seized the book from the air. He glared at Twilight, his eyes sparks of hellfire.
Sorry.
Twilight cringed and took a few steps backward, nearly falling off the couch's end.
I didn't mean any harm. I've always liked books. I just wanted to see if my magic was coming back.
For a moment, I wondered why a creature with such extraordinary powers would be afraid of a human. But then, if she had never met anyone like us before, she had no idea what we were capable of. Yeah, humans do look pretty weird compared to most creatures.
Yeah. Like, have you ever seen bipedal creatures that stand up straight? Look at these fucking feet, dude. They're so weird.
No fur, no feathers.
Some of us are hairy.
Not compared to horses.
Yeah. My dad gets pretty close.
Her shoulder only reached my waist, and difference in stature must have been intimidating. Adams backed off, holding the Bible away from Twilight, as if she might attack it. I suppressed a sigh of relief. "Just a misunderstanding," I said, risking more trouble. "You were casting the spell, and then what?"
Well,
said Twilight, keeping one eye on Adams.
just as I broke through, I must have blacked out from the unexpected strain. You know the rest.
She regained a bit of her composure, standing to her full diminutive height.
So here I am, in an alien world. Or, I'm in your world, so I guess I'm the alien.
There was a brief silence as we considered all this. "Can you get back the same way?" I said at last.
Actually, it might be easier since I'm familiar with where I'm going, and I've already had the nasty surprises. But
For the third time, Twilight looked out the window in vain.
not in this weather. It needs to be clear and calm, something to do with the electromagnetic status of the atmosphere.
"You might be in luck," I said. "Every year around this time, we get a period of clear, calm weather, and it's due any day now."
Forecast calls for it,
Adams said. He sounded less than pleased. I supposed he did not want the living proof to leave us so soon. I did not know whether we should ask our guest to stay, but doubted we could prevent her from leaving if she wanted to.
Listen, I was wondering.
Twilight said.
Earlier, you said not everyone believes in unicorns.
As far as most people know, they're mythical, I said. Now I was using weasel words, too. I neglected to tell her that most people meant everyone except Adams. And now me.
That's really incredible.
Twilight put a hoof to her temple.
It's kind of funny, really. I always thought alternate realities were just speculation, but here I am. And I guess there's no way of anticipating what you'll find in completely different universes. I mean, there are books and lighthouses, but no unicorns or alicorns. And I guess there are no Pegasi or Earthperonis or, dragons here either, huh?
What do you know about dragons?
Adams's interjection seemed to catch Twilight off guard, and she winced a little at the edge in his voice.
Well, I might have known a few.
She again picked her words carefully.
That's not a problem, I hope.
I got the feeling I was watching someone unknowingly commit suicide. There was no way Adams would look at the facts without certain prejudices. I couldn't remember what the scriptures said about dragons, but I knew Adams's opinion. They were evil creatures.
We have some duties to take care of,
Adams said.
Make yourself comfortable. We'll be back.
He motioned for me to follow him, and marched out the front door, a little more quickly than usual. "Excuse us for a moment, please, Twilight," I said, and hurried after him. Doodly doodly do.
Doodly doodly do.
A moment later, Adams and I stood in one of the outbuildings, surrounded by various Coast Guard necessities. Anemometer, radio telephone, tool chest, the esoteric machines that made the microwave emitter work, and so forth. Adams peered out the window towards his house, then turned to me.
I don't believe a word,
he said. He still gripped the soft-cover Bible in one hand, white-knuckled, as though he was afraid of it being torn from him. There was only one chair in the room, and I claimed it in preparation for whatever he said next. Adams continued.
Her story doesn't add up. It doesn't explain why she speaks our language, and I don't believe God would make other Earths.
Though nowhere near as biblical as him, I was quite capable of approaching him as such. Sure he would have, I said. Didn't you ever read C.S. Lewis?
Oh, that is a sick reference.
Now, what did C.S. Lewis do in the Bible?
Oh, well, he actually wrote the entire thing.
Oh!
No.
I was wondering why his name was always on the outside.
Narnia is a separate... Narnia, written by C.S. Lewis, was a separate thing made by... It was a separate world made by God. And Aslan is actually Jesus.
Oh, that's right, I forgot.
Not just a metaphor for Jesus, he is actually Jesus.
She uses magic.
Well, what do you expect? I mean...
This isn't some harmless Harry Potter stuff.
Harry Potter is not harmless. Have you ever heard of Avada Kedavra? He said.
Real magic is a tool of Satan's followers.
Also, Avada Kedavra is actually painless. Crucio would be the better pull there.
Oh, that does sound painful.
It's the torture spell.
Does it just make you feel pain?
Yeah, I think so.
Nice. Oh, Christ. I was afraid of this. Listen, I said. Maybe this is a test. Maybe she's like one of those angels who went to see if there were any good people in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Angels have never taken that shape.
Hey, they could take any shape, man. Adams said. Well, I said, angels' true forms are terrifying, so maybe this one needed a way to show us she was something higher than human, without scaring us. Either that, or her story is true. My avid reading meant I had not come to this debate unarmed, but could I make him see reason?
There is a third possibility,
Adams said. He looked out the window again. I decided to appeal to his professionalism. Well, we sure as hell can't call the brass about this. They'd assume we had cabin fever or something. Adams said nothing, but scrunched up his face in concentration. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Look, I said. If she was here to do something unpleasant, she would have done it by now. Remember why we took this job. We're supposed to help every person who needs it.
It's not a person,
Adams said. Well, she talks like one. And did he see how scared she was? Adams, hard-faced, stared at the ground. I pressed the advantage I hoped I had. And if this is a test from the Almighty, imagine what will happen to us if we fail. Come to think of it, I know the Bible mentions unicorns, but do you remember exactly what it says? Because I don't. Adams opened the book and began to leaf through it.
I have to check this out. Go make sure it doesn't try something.
Outside, the wind and rain had slackened a bit, and I mentally prayed the sky would clear by the time the sun rose. That was Chapter 1 of Biblical Monsters. So this was not exactly what I was thinking this would be from the title, but I'm liking this so far.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is interesting. Not quite horrifying yet. That part comes later. That was also the longest chapter. Yay!
Yay! Just give me shorter chapters from now on. Chapter 2. When I returned to Adams's house, I found Twilight in front of the 2 full bookshelves on the far side of the main room. Her eye scanned the spines methodically, and when I got close, I saw, or thought I saw, a speck of drool on her lower lip. She raised a hoof at the Icelandic sagas, stopped just short of touching the first of the 2 volumes, and pulled away. "I think you could look at those books," I said. "Just avoid the ones with crosses on them." She turned to me.
Why are they special?
Her tone was earnest, not flippant. "Good question," I said. "I like reading it sometimes. I have a copy myself. Some people, well, they're touchy about it. It would take a long time to explain." She turned back to the shelf.
Does it have something to do with him having more than one copy?
Sort of. It's a very old book, with different translations. As I said this, a quiet inkling entered the back of my head, but when I turned my mind's eye upon it, it vanished like a match flame before a gust.
What's up?
Twilight must have noticed my contemplative expression. "Nothing. I was just wondering. You can read our language, can't you? As well as speak it,"
Actually,
she said.
I was wondering how you were speaking my language.
"Yeah, it's called English in Equestria too, but don't know why it's called that there.
Actually, it's called Ponish.
Is that canon?"
Well, we know Old Ponish is canon, so I assume.
Huh. Wait, why is it called Ponish if the griffins and the dragons and Draconiqui and whatnot speak it?
Because it's made for toddlers.
She tapped her head with one hoof, her face a picture of intense concentration.
Think. It may have something to do with the spell I cast. That can happen with certain complicated magics that aren't properly documented. Your friend,
"Adams," I said.
Adams. He was nearby when the magic gate opened.
She began pacing back and forth, again thinking out loud.
Could the spell have copied his linguistic knowledge into my brain? Was that the reason it took so much energy all of a sudden? It would make sense to include something like that. It wouldn't be good to drop into a completely unfamiliar place, not knowing the language. Starswirl, you really were a genius. But then, why didn't Adams notice when that happened? Because he was asleep, of course. He said he found me right after waking up. Yes, that makes sense. And if you want to make sense of this story, you should go down to the description and read it yourself.
Yeah!
Forgot to do that.
Better at least give it a like, y'all. I want to see that like counter go up for as many views as downloads, whatever this thing has. Listens? For as many listeners as we have, that should go up by that many likes.
Yes. And also, if you don't, you will get visited by real biblical monsters. And they ain't Twilight. Real fucked up stuff.
"Listen," I said. "About him."
Yeah?
She must have sensed the unease in my voice, for a little crease of worry appeared on her brow. I stepped away from Twilight and lowered myself into Adams's easy chair to make my appearance less threatening. "Something you should know? He's afraid of you." Twilight bit her lower lip.
That book says something about unicorns, doesn't it?
Maybe. It wasn't a question. "And dragons," I said. "Among other things." She looked at the bookshelf again.
What exactly does it say?
"All I remember is dragons are evil." I leaned forward. "And you've actually met them?" I couldn't stop an undertone of wonder from creeping into my voice. She nodded.
Guess I should have kept quiet. I should leave as soon as I can. I have offended him, and, well...
She trailed off. You're as scared of him as he is of you.
Does that help?
I don't think he'd believe you if you told him. Twilight sat back on her haunches, and her ears drooped.
I guess I can't be angry with him,
she said.
I've known a lot of people who get ideas in their heads, and won't be rational or reasonable about them. And someone with a book collection can't be all bad.
You and him would get along, you know, I said. If you love literature as much as you seem to. This was true, and I felt a little pang of sadness about it. Adams did not have many friends. The creak and slam of a screen door came from outside the kitchen. Adams marched into the room. 2 pairs of eyes followed him. He ignored us. He walked to the counter drawers, opened one, and withdrew a long knife. The kitchen's fluorescent light glinted off its edge. He turned to the refrigerator, opened it, and withdrew a bag of carrots. He then put a handful of these on a cutting board and began chopping them into large chunks. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Adams put the carrot sticks on a plate and placed it on the kitchen table, along with a bowl of water. He turned and stalked down to the basement, the entrance to which was between the kitchen and foyer. There was a pregnant pause.
There was a pregnant Twilight.
No, not another impregnation fic. Twilight rose and walked to the table. I guess this is a good sign, I said, following her. She nodded and picked up one of the sticks with the same weird telekinetic ability she had used before. Adams had not peeled the carrots, but if this bothered Twilight, she did not show it. Who cares about peeled carrots, honestly?
Yeah, I know, right? I don't. Even so,
she said between bites.
Yum, 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 yum.
Did Adams actually say that was for her?
Nope.
Oh boy, he's gonna get mad. Where did my snack go?
Why'd I eat my carrot?
I'm gonna blame narrator, or Wizzy Puff as I will now call him. I still think I should leave as soon as I can. It's really too bad, but if I don't know anything about the people here, and they seem to already know some things about unicorns, and they've made their minds up...
Oh boy, she's becoming a victim of xenophobia.
Oh no.
She levitated the bowl and sipped at it, like a human would from a cup. But we didn't already know, I thought. Nothing in the story Twilight had told, nor in the way she had spoken or acted, matched any mythology I had read about. In fact, in a flash of insight, the inkling that had ticked the back of my mind burst into my consciousness. Excuse me, Twilight. I rose and hurried to the room where Adams kept the laptop he used for correspondence. Doodly doodly do. She's not biblical.
What?
Here, look. I had found Adams sitting at the basement workbench, flipping back and forth between pages in the Bible and reading them by the glow of a trouble light. Now I held up the laptop and pointed to one paragraph in particular. Right here, the King James translation was wrong. The Hebrew word was riam, which translates to auroch. That was a subspecies of large cattle. Oh, okay. You are not going to try and convince me that unicorns aren't in the Bible, sir. Good day.
And also, if you're trying to do that, it's not going to work. Trust me, as a Christian who has fought with a few other Christians about certain translated things in the Bible, it never works.
But that translation isn't what I want. Though that's literally what I'm doing right now. But what I'm doing is harmless, okay?
You say it's harmless now, but when there are actual unicorns that show up at your door...
Then I can be like, yay, like the Bible. And I don't know what they did in the Bible, but yay.
I mean, Adam seems to think they're pretty bad, so...
Yeah, but he's a kook.
You're a coot.
Adam said nothing, but stared at the screen, his eyes flitting across the paragraph once, twice, 3 times, the corners of his mouth turned down. Despite everything, I felt a little sorry for him.
Well,
He said at last.
she's something.
There was no positive inflection in his words. I decided to press the logical conclusion. So there's no reason for any unpleasant behavior.
Never said there was.
His voice had a grouchy undertone, as if he was annoyed at having to explain the obvious. The book on the bench still lay open, and he turned back to it and resumed leafing through. I think I'll let her stay in my house, I said, until she can leave. Adams looked out the basement's small ground-level window.
Weather's still rough.
Doodly-doodly-doo. Twilight and I stepped into the storm, and out of habit I made to lean into the wind. But there was another flash of magenta, and I found myself inside a transparent, luminous sphere that deflected the wind and rain. Bemused, I stared for a moment at the drops running down the field's outer edge, then looked at Twilight, whose horn again glowed. She smiled a little at my perplexed expression and gestured with a foreleg.
Shall we?
This station doesn't have a spare dwelling, I said as we walked. But those houses were built for families, so there's plenty of room. I keep a cot and some sheets handy in case we need to put someone up for a while.
Thank you very much,
she said.
Hey, what's in there?
From an outbuilding close to my house, there came a constant low rumbling. The engine room, I said.
What kind of engines?
Diesel.
Never heard of it.
She pointed her snout at the building.
May I see them?
No. You'd have to get the okay from Adams, I said. Twilight did not press the issue. As we entered my basement's door, Twilight lowered the weather shield bit by bit, like someone folding an umbrella while bringing it indoors. Inside, she looked to and fro at the gear and various junk arranged around the walls and under the stairs. Tools, workbenches, scrap timber, flotsam from beaches, and so on.
That's interesting.
She said.
You have a lot of the same tools we do.
She put a hoof on a sledgehammer leaning against the near wall.
Yours are bigger, though.
Are you cold? It had only just occurred to me.
Just a little.
She said, turning to me.
Why?
The spare clothes won't fit you, but I'm guessing your people normally go naked. Twilight cocked an eyebrow.
Is that unusual here?
For a moment, I considered how to answer this. We always wear clothes. No.
He just starts parading around naked.
I said. Except when bathing or doing things clothes get in the way of. I had never been comfortable talking about such matters. I started up the stairs and motioned for her to follow me. My house's floor plan was much like Adams's, but since mine was built on a small hill and was not quite as deep set into the ground, my main floor afforded an excellent view of the land and sea around Cook Point. But at the moment, the only clear images were the rain pelting the windows, and the beams from the light tower as they circled around and around through the early morning darkness. Twilight's eyes brightened when she saw the nearly full bookshelf next to the largest window, and the sea charts that covered much of the walls. She turned to me with an expression that implicitly said, "Can I, please?" "Help yourself," I said. She trotted to the shelf and eyed the selection like a starving man given a menu.
I guess it makes sense that lighthouse keepers would have personal libraries.
Out here, the mind stagnates without them, I said. A hardcover volume glowed magenta and floated down toward my guest. To Kill a Mockingbird, I said. Good choice. Adams gave me that, when he was done with it. Mockingbird still hovered next to Twilight's head as she turned to respond.
He's not really as mean as he acts, is he?
Not once you get to know him, I said. He just has a few hang-ups. At that moment, exhaustion caught up to me without warning, and I put a hand on the doorway to steady myself. Listen. I bet you're tired, and my shift doesn't start until noon. I'll set up the cot, and we'll both get some sleep. And we'll sort everything out during the day.
Great,
Twilight said.
What a relief. I was afraid you didn't even have daylight in this part of the world.
I chuckled a bit at this as I made my way to the spare room. In the back of my mind, I wondered if my visitor was a dream or hallucination that would vanish by dawn. In a few minutes, the accommodations were in order, and I bade Twilight a good rest. She put a forehoof on the cot, then paused and turned to me.
Hey,
she said.
There's no tactful way to ask this, but what do you call yourselves? Your species, I mean.
Humans, I said.
Humans.
She rolled the word around in her mouth.
Thanks. That was driving me crazy.
Despite my exhaustion, I found myself wide awake when I reached my own bed in the room across the hall. I switched on the reading lamp on the bedside table. There were 6 books on that table, and my hand happened to fall upon the large one with a cross on the cover. I cracked it at a random page and read the first lines my eyes found. And I heard, as if it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, "Come and see." And I saw, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering, and to conquer. I closed it. I switched off the lamp. I lay awake in the dark, and turned the last few hours' events over in my head. It was almost too much to comprehend in a short span of time. Everything I knew had been turned inside out, and I could not decide whether to mourn the simpler past or look forward to whatever the future would hold. For better or worse, it would be interesting. In the meantime, I had to wait, and that was the worst part of it all. I doubted things could truly go back to the way they had been, but I did not know enough to be certain. My visitor had given me no logical reason to fear her, but in the dark, alone with my thoughts, I found myself wishing there was a lock on my bedroom door. Ugh. I would too.
Oh.
That was Chapter 2 of Biblical Monsters by Hoarse Voice.
My goodness. This is truly an interesting read so far.
This has been. It hasn't really gotten creepy or anything spooky yet, but I still feel like it's pretty fitting for the beginning of the month.
Yeah.
Just dipping our toes.
Yeah, it's definitely setting up more tension than anything scary. I'm curious if it'll... just how much it'll lean into that.
Yeah. I'm hoping that it gets, like, you know, it's marked dark horror tragedy, but I hope we get some gore, too.
Doesn't look like it.
Man.
What I wonder is Twilight the monster, or is it going to be like Adams going crazy?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. He broke into my room with a saddle and riding crop.
This does interest me. I'm really happy that we're finally reading this.
Yeah.
Or I guess rather that I'm finally reading this, because I've been meaning to for a while, since before the podcast.
Dang. Well, it's a good time to be reading it.
Yep.
Yeah, what would you do if you found her on your... Like, imagine you are, for some reason, you know, you're at a lighthouse. I'm the narrator guy, and you find the unconscious body of Twilight Sparkle on your doorstep.
Do I know who Twilight Sparkle is in this hypothetical world?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's say no.
Then I don't know. She probably looks kind of cute.
And she does.
I guess I would save her. I only save cute things from the weather. Oh, but she might be icky.
What if she's like, smells like wet horse?
Ah, yuck.
Okay. I think that just about wraps everything up for this edition of the Fanfiction Gallery.
I think so as well.
I hope you all have a wonderful month of Halloween. I have been your host, Wizzy Puff.
And I have been your other host, Ross Pitt. Join us next time for our next exhibit.
Good night, everyone. See ya! Who is actually talking? I want to know if it's Twilight, so I can actually do a Twilight voice.
I've got to guess that it's not Twilight. I think the biblical monsters... Yeah, the biblical monsters are going to be horses.
Okay. That adds up. Okay.
As far as we know, this man's name is Wizzy. If they are, man.
Ooh la la, I hope it's Wizzy.